Yeah, sure. Hey guys, pleasure being around here. My name is Miles, and I'm founder and CEO of Fano Labs. Today I'm talking about our company. Um, Fano Labs is actually an AI company. We're focused on the regulatory compliance market for the financial industries. And actually, this is something that the regulatory compliance in the global scale is a massive market. So over the past 2 years, there were over 15 billion US dollars in fines levied by global regulators over financial institutes such as banks, insurance companies. And this banks, insurance companies spend over $181 billion every single year to make sure that they do not to make sure that they comply with the regulations and they do not get fined. And then as a financial hub in Hong Kong, the regulation landscape is equally kind of very tough. So every year, regulators in Hong Kong levied over 1.3 billion Hong Kong dollars in fines. That's primarily levied by SFC, Hong Kong MA, Insurance Authority, and a little bit by MPF Authority. And of course, and then even in Hong Kong, all banks, insurance companies, they spend over 1 billion Hong Kong dollars every single year to ensure that they are compliant with regulation. And part of regulation is actually and is related with the sales of financial products. So every year, Hong Kong market has over $1 trillion Hong Kong dollars in sales of financial products such as investment products, ETFs, structured products, etc. And banks spend over 1 billion every dollar every year to ensure that the sales of these kind of products are compliant with regulation. And of course, if they breach it, so here's a scale of fines. So pretty much all the big financial firms in Hong Kong, they will fine in some one way or another. Some bigger fines happen at scale half a billion. Smaller fines that easily tens of millions Hong Kong dollars for a breach. But the problem with the finance sales of sales compliance is actually, if you've been to banks, if you buy in Hong Kong, if you buy financial products, you'll probably experience the fact that before you can buy something, the relationship manager, like the bank guy, will sit you down in a room. They'll start recording, and they'll go through all those procedures. They do a KYC on you. They will ask you for identity or address, your investment past histories, and they will go through all the risks associated to make sure you understand there are risks associated with that. And they also did not do an evaluation about what you want to buy, what is your investment target, and what kind of products it's actually they're trying to sell, and whether it's a match. And if RM, the relationship manager, does not fulfill that regulatory compliance, and if you as a customer lose money, they file a complaint. So first of all, the banks will need to compensate you for all the losses. And at the same time, there's a high chance the regulator will come after the bank for a fine. And that's actually very expensive. But the problem is actually when it comes to selling a financial product, it's very hard for relationship managers to remember all the steps. For instance, for one of our customers in the bank, when they want to sell a bond kind of product, the relationship manager has 63 different steps to follow before they can structure a deal. So if the relationship manager misses any single step, and that deal can be very risky. And that's for the front line. So the front line is actually what's happening on the front line is actually whenever there's a sale, there's another guy, typically it's called a controller, the control guys, they will sample the recording, the transaction recordings, and listen to it and check whether the sales process, the sales tactics are compliant with regulation. But it's very hard for this controller to cover what's going on. And plus, it's also very expensive for them to listen to these recordings. And and more importantly, when it comes to the senior management for banks, it's also very painful because they do not really have a holistic view about what's going on. And normally, if there's a really big thing happen, like in rare cases where a relationship manager really did some very bad sales tactics and somebody got really hurt, the senior manager of the bank could go to jail. So that those things can happen if you go to SFC enforcement news. Those are things everywhere. But for senior management, it's really hard for them to know what's really going on because there's so many branches, so many region managers, and so many transactions. And also for every different product in the sell, the procedures are different. So what we do is actually we deploy our AI technologies to help the financial institutes, mostly banks and broker firms. What we do for them is actually we give them a portal for relationship managers, the frontline sales. So whenever they start recording a sales process, for the 3 to 4 minutes after the sales is completed, we turn the entire audio into text. We use AI to analyze it, and we tell them over the 40 or 50 different steps the relationship manager has to go through or has to mention to the customer whether there are things that the relationship manager missed and whether there are things that he mentioned something that they're not supposed to say. And so if our machine did make the mistake, the RM can just ignore it. But if we spot something that RM really forgot to mention, like there's a risk for related with the foreign exchange, the relation manager forgot to mention about it during the sales process, he can start over again. So typically regulators will not fine you if you redo the recording before the deal happens. So that gives you immediate feedback for relation manager, and also make it easier for controllers, the first line, second line defense, to review these recordings because they don't have to listen to it, just to read it, the transcripts. But at the same time, we'll also give the senior manager a holistic view on daily basis. Every day we'll give you a report, very simple report, like what is the dollar amount, in terms of transaction that have potential regulatory compliance issues, and what are they about? Are they related with the know your customer? Is it related with the suitability risks? Is it related with is it related with the vulnerable customer? Like VCs, vulnerable customers are very sensitive in most cases. And as a matter of fact, and then at the same time, we're also regulators are buying from us as well, because when banks are forced to conduct self reviews over these recordings and make sure they really follow the procedures, regulator will have to knock on the door, acquire the data, and do some samples. And sometimes if there's a complaint, the regulators will knock on the door, acquire your data, and do analysis themselves. But it takes a lot of time for regulators, for investigators to really go through all the recordings and see what's going on. So we also sell.
Miles, we're out of time. Can you please quickly finish the pitch, and then we can move to the Q&A?
Okay, very quickly. So that's a background about me. Me and my co-founder, we come from HKU. We used to run a research lab in HKU. We still have one, but we spun it off from HKU. So we have a long list of customers from governments, law enforcement, the courts, judiciary measurements, lots of banks, insurance companies, and we're backed by Science Park, Horizons Ventures, Alibaba Entrepreneurs Fund, and Hong Kong U. And of course, we got lots of awards over the past few years. So we currently have over 70 employees, and we have with 40, 50 large global scale, large enterprises as our customers. And we have a little competition, but here, one of the unique things about what we do is actually we're very specialized in processing mixed languages. So here in Hong Kong, same in Singapore, where people are multilingual. So in a sales process, there could be English, there could be Chinese, there could be some other languages in the middle. So we can process all of them. And I think I'll quickly wrap up. I think 5 minutes is too short to go through what we're trying to do. It's because our business is kind of complicated.
Thank you very much. I know it's a very short. So let's start with questions.
Afternoon, as somebody who has been a manager in charge at a financial organization, I understand the pitch, and I think it is a fascinating product. I suppose the question I have for you is, have you actually deployed the product, and how is it performing relative to, I suppose, legacy processes?
Yeah, so we already deployed for many customers. We started on the government side. Because normally when before we venture the financial market, we're primarily in the government sector. We work with the Hong Kong police force, work with the ICAC, the anti-corruption, and we also work with the correctional service, which is the prison, and then the judiciary department, which is the court. So they used to use our technology for investigation for most of the time commercial crimes. And then we start deploying for banks as well, because for banks, as it turned out, they also need to do internal investigation. So already been DBS, Hong Kong Bank, China Construction Bank, and then we have a couple of more, and also BNP Paribas. They're all our customers. And so far, basically, what we do is actually we typically charge. Our bill is actually our pitch on sales side is actually we charge you for roughly what's equivalent to one controller's annual salary, but a machine can do 10 times what a controller can do. That's kind of scale we've been doing. And also for investigation side, if there's an investigation case you have to handle, both either internal or being investigated by someone, we speed up the investigation time by 10 times. So that's what we're seeing right now.
So just so I understand your model and your pricing. So it's a fixed price, or how do you price it? That relative to the scale of the work, and and what are your margins kind of out of that, or how do you look at the evolution in market?
Yeah, we price based on, first of all, we're charging annual fees because we need to give you constant updates on the models and all the regulatory rules that we have to ship. And then in terms of the actual billing, the actual dollar amount, it scales to the usage volume. Let's say if you are a very small bank, you only have one branch, or you are a small broker and you only have 2 relationship managers, and you roughly have, I don't know, let's say 10,000 transactions every single year. Then we'll charge, and then every transaction will have half an hour of recording. Then we charge you X amount of dollars for every hour recording that we have to process for you. But if you are international, very large scale bank where we have lots of transaction recordings coming in every single day, then the bill will be much higher because we're consumption based. And there's also we also have bill in some cases. We also charge people because there's sometimes when we people don't really use our tools to do real-time analysis. What they're trying to do is actually they need to dig up the history. Like there's a complaint that nobody know about it that was talking about transaction that happened 10 years ago. You need to figure out what was that. So in that case, we have to go through a very long archive, and of course for that the bill will be at a different balance tier because that's pretty much a one-off. It's going to be a one-off charge because we need to dig through the data from 10 years ago.
It seems that you also have a long list of customers in public sector and other industries, right? So are you focusing primarily on financial, or is really any companies that have a lot of CRM activities?
So we have lots of, we are Fano is actually we're a deep tech deep tech company. So we're really focused on the speech recognition technologies, speaker verification, and NLP technologies. So what we do is basically our core technology is actually given an audio, a long audio, and we tell you who are the speakers in there. First, how many speakers are there? Who are they? At what time did they speak? And what did they speak? And what do they mean when they say that? So that's the technology we do. And we build lots of applications on top of that. So regulatory compliance is our focus for this year. Part of that, we have lots of presence in the public sector, primarily in the government, travel, airlines, those kind of industries. So as a technology company, for us, the building application is really not that hard because we own the entire technology. All we have to do is just find new big problems to solve with our technologies. Like for instance, we just released, there was actually a press release by one of our customers. They're talking about, it's by China Mobile. They just issued a press release 3 days ago, and they talked about using our technologies, and they use our technology to analyze the recordings in their customer service centers. And then they manage to spot lots of the customers who might be churned, so they take action before the customer got churned. And in return, they made like over 30 million Hong Kong dollars in churn reduction, in terms of value every single year. So they issued a press release on that as well. So that's also
okay. We have less than 1 minute left. Miles, you may be cut and move to a breakout room at 45 sharp. So you will talk to another colleague. Maybe we have a quick last question. Anthony, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, real quick. So I understand that the technology is deep learning based. Do you guys have separate deep learning models for each vertical, or one deep learning model for everything?
So internally, I think we must have over 1,000 different models. So it really depends on what is the application, what is the customer, and what is the domain. So we have a very large general model, and we have several different domain vertical specific models. Even inside each vertical, we have further down, a small vertical, sub vertical inside a vertical, that kind of thing. So it really depends. So normally when we deploy a customer, so we need to do some experimentations. So we acquire some data.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
And we see what's the best.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Oops. Okay, N-Track.